Gun control is a highly debated and controversial topic that refers to the regulation of the possession, use, and sale of firearms. Advocates of gun control argue that it's necessary to reduce gun violence and protect public safety, while opponents claim that gun ownership is a constitutional right protected by the Second Amendment and that gun control measures infringe upon individual liberties. The following are some of the key points in the gun control debate. The Second Amendment to the Second Amendment of this Constitution protects the right of citizens to keep and bear arms. Supporters of gun ownership argue that it is a fundamental right and that any attempt to regulate it infringes upon individual freedoms. Gun violence. The supporters of gun control argue that the high incidence of gun violence, including mass shootings and homicides, is a public health crisis that requires effective regulation of firearms. Opponents argue that most gun owners are responsible and that it is not fair to punish them for the actions of a few criminals. Types of firearms. The supporters of gun control argue that certain types of firearms, such as assault weapons, should be banned or more strictly regulated. Opponents argue that such measures are ineffective and that law-abiding citizens should be allowed to own any type of firearm they choose. Background checks. The supporters of gun control argue that all gun purchases should be subject to background checks to prevent criminals and people with mental illness from obtaining firearms. Opponents argue that such measures are burdensome and ineffective. Gun ownership and public safety. Supporters of gun control argue that countries with stricter gun control laws have lower rates of gun violence and higher rates of public safety. Opponents argue that such comparisons are flawed and that individual freedoms should not be sacrificed for the sake of collective safety. Enforcement. Of both sides agree that existing gun laws should be enforced more effectively, but differ on how to achieve this. In conclusion, gun control is a complex issue that involves balancing individual freedoms with public safety.